From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
President Biden on Thursday made a speech about the recent spate of shootdowns over the American homeland, including a Chinese spy balloon taken down over the Atlantic Ocean. But what do we learn about 3 other flying objects taken down over Alaska, Canada, and Lake Huron? Also, President Biden gets a checkup. The White House released a letter detailing the president's latest physical exam. But as the president seriously weighs re-election in 2024, what does the public think about the possibility of a president who will be 82 on his second inauguration? Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Kate Batchelder-Odell, a member of the Journal's editorial board, a sometimes guest, but today I've reached the inner sanctum I'm hosting. I'm joined by 2 of the best colleagues and co-conspirators, columnist Kimberly Strassel and editorial board member Colin Levy. Ladies, welcome to the show. President Biden spoke to the American people on Thursday, and let's take a quick listen of what he had to say.
We don't yet know exactly what these 3 objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these 3 objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research.
Kim, the president said also that we've been messing with our radars, essentially picking up more stuff than before. In other words, it sort of looks like we underreacted to the Chinese spy balloon. We let it traipse across the continental U.S. We only went public with it after some civilians in Montana spotted it and only shot it down after blowback from Congress. But then it looks like perhaps the administration may have panicked a bit and put some Sidewinder missiles through what may have been research aircraft. I think Americans are puzzled by this story. Do you buy this explanation?
By the way, Kate, if it's even something like research aircraft, we now have reports coming out and can't be confirmed that there's a hobbyist balloon group in Illinois that said that one of their balloons, which costs under $100, went missing over Alaska on the same day that we sent a Sidewinder out. So there's very big possibility, or at least as big a possibility as anything else, that we just spent $400,000 on a Sidewinder to take down essentially a Mickey Mouse balloon out of the sky. And, that's what makes it so difficult when the president comes and says, here's the latest information. Trust us. We've got a hold of this. There's nothing to actually suggest that. That's why I'm having trouble buying it. Maybe let's be hopeful that, in fact, these balloons were scientific or private research, that they weren't, in fact, another 3 objects coming out of a flotilla of Chinese spy balloons. That would certainly be better in terms of what we're hoping for. But think about what we've been told so far. Essentially, the president says, well, we've retuned our radar now, and so we're seeing more things in the sky. We're only just doing this, especially in light of the fact that the same intelligence community told us that they had found out some time ago that Chinese had done this before. So we knew that this was happening, and yet we didn't have a plan, and we weren't already searching the skies for things like this. That's a little disturbing. It's a little disturbing that our military says that they still have yet to be able to recover any of the things that they've downed other than that first helium balloon. So when the president comes out and says, there's nothing to make us believe this and we should all just calm down and turn to another story, I think it's very reasonable for Americans to not have a lot of trust in that and to feel as though one of 2 things: either they're not being told the whole story or our government doesn't know what's going on, neither of which is very reassuring.
Yeah, no kidding, Kim. And to your point about the difficulty recovering debris, if these do turn out to be hobby balloons, that would explain that they probably were pulverized and we'll have a difficult time getting any debris back from them. But Colin, now obviously we have suddenly stopped blasting objects out of the sky and are back to status quo ante. But the president was quick to say he'd act again if another foreign threat appeared. He seems to want to cast this episode as a moment of being tough on China, a victory even. So I want to ask you, what do you think we've learned about the Chinese balloon flotilla so far? And as an Asia hand, how do you think the U.S. reaction is being received in China?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think China's puffing a lot for sure, but I don't get the feeling that they really mean it. It's almost like it's diplomatic pro forma. First, they said it was a weather balloon that drifted due to force majeure. The foreign ministry spokesman said that the U.S. had overreacted and that they wouldn't stand for this sort of thing. But, it all sort of seemed like a bit of a face-saving exercise to me. I mean, of course, China knows what's in its own balloon. And of course, they know that this resolution of it was probably inevitable. I think the more salient thing here is what they have learned about the U.S. defense operation by seeing all of this play out with the initial delay as the balloon sort of drifted and traipsed and everyone watched it and wondered what was going to happen. Then what appeared to be a sort of disorganized overreaction, as you guys were just talking about. I think, it made me think this was almost like a literal trial balloon. And I don't think it reflected very well on the U.S. defense operations. I think there's concern there because it just all feels really very ad hoc. I was, as Kim was, startled to read earlier this week that Washington had just added 6 entities to an export blacklist in the wake of the balloon gate. So we didn't know that there was mischief going on before. It just all seems kind of reactionary.
Right. And to the ad hoc point, U.S. officials are leaking now that perhaps this hapless weather balloon, spy balloon, really meant to fly over Guam and Hawaii. But that just raises questions about what we were planning to do about that. Kim, I want to ask you, I think one of the core questions here is what Biden will do to close what are obvious gaps in U.S. air defenses. I think there's an opportunity here to make some investments, make some changes to our radar so that we're not just flying around looking at hobby weather balloons or Chinese spy balloons and we can't tell the difference. President has a budget request coming out in a month, we hope. And I'm curious, do you think we'll see any change of strategy, any funding for this, any admission that we don't have everything we need?
From everything we've seen from the Biden administration, it would like to move beyond this and never talk about it again. Do I think we're going to get some people in Congress who are definitely going to demand that and continue to demand some answers from the Pentagon about what we're doing here? Yes. I loved the fascinating military lingo that was used to describe our problem here, that we have a domain gap. I think that is technocratic for we've got a major problem. And, I was talking to some interesting people about this. It's fascinating. We have all this incredible military hardware, that can just do the most remarkable things. And yet it turns out, and we're not alone in this, other countries too, there's this incredible vulnerability when it comes to things that fly high in the sky and don't move very fast, right? By the way, this is why our radar didn't catch them, is because those radars are tuned to catch things that are moving at incredibly quick speeds, whether they be missiles or whether they be fighter jets, etc. We have a commercial air aviation radar that's designed to see yet other things, also, again, big things. But, that gets to this interesting question. There was a lot of people I saw saying, well, why didn't we just capture one of these things? Or why didn't we shoot it down with bullets? Why did we have to send a Sidewinder? It turns out because fighter jets fly really, really, really fast and they stall out at low speeds. And we don't have any way to get near something that is that high in the sky and barely moving at all. There was sort of danger questions about the fighter pilots who were engaged in this and how do you actually get close to this or not run into it, given that it's basically just standing in the sky. And so we've got a lot of questions to ask here that maybe even go beyond radar. Like, do we have drones that can handle something like this, or do we not? That's really high altitude. So there's a lot of really fascinating technological questions. And I think it kind of raises the interesting question, if that wasn't deliberate on China's part, if they don't know that this is actually a very specific way to kind of get in and look at things, and that countries don't necessarily have an easy way to defend against.
Yeah, Kim, it's a great point. So the Chinese spy balloon was operating up above 60,000 feet. And an F-22 fighter jet can get up there and take care of it, and did, but not all of our fighter aircraft have that kind of altitude ability. So we have this kind of high altitude vulnerability that we may now just be becoming aware of. The other 3 objects were at lower altitudes, I think closer to 20,000 feet over Lake Huron. But to your point, they don't have a lot of great ways for dealing with this. And I'd note too that in Biden's Thursday speech, there was very little on any of these gaps. He made motions about how we're going to create global norms for launching these kinds of things and update the rules and regulations for launching them, but very little on what he would actually do to defend U.S. airspace. Colin, is there anything you think that the Biden administration could do on the Chinese spy balloon question that they haven't yet? How are you reading those export controls other than, to your point, reactionary? Are they substantive? Do we think the U.S. parts are ending up in some of these balloons, or do you think that's a good move?
I think that the export controls are important. I think the question is maybe why we haven't been watching this a little bit more carefully before. I will say, Kate, a lot of this is actually really funny, and also it's really not. I think it's a memorable episode that all of us are watching happen right now. It's the kind of thing that kids will read about in history books someday, about this strange interlude where the entire US public was training all of its attention on the fact that there's the existence of a whole community of independent balloon enthusiasts and that these private hobby balloons actually can interfere with aircrafts and now pose some sort of military risk. So I'd like to know from the Biden administration, how are we going to deal with sorting out which are the dangerous balloons and which are the not very dangerous Mickey Mouse balloons, as we said before. So I really think it's all been a bit surreal. And I guess we should at least maybe feel some relief that at least the White House has addressed the growing UFO conspiracy theories that have been floating around. So maybe those will be starting to deflate. That at least actually would be a net benefit coming out of this episode.
Yes, I mean, for days, the White House demurred on pretty much everything except to say aliens aren't our leading theory right now. Thank you. That's helpful. And though some of us might have thought the aliens might not be the least bad explanation at this point.